On behalf of Eco Products and the Hode Group, our repping company here in the state of Florida and throughout the Southeast, and Edward Don, of course, for helping put this together, it's really our mission statement as a company. Our values proposition is not only to manufacture and make product for the industry, but if people don't understand how all of this works and what the alternatives are out there, then we're going to fail. And it's venues like this where we have an opportunity to stand before business owners, community leaders, and as a community itself to really bring forth what's going on in the food service industry. So again, my hope today is to help enlighten and hopefully educate all of us together, because I think what I was so impressed with KBB and with Litter Quitters is that this is a community effort. And things change when communities get involved. And I stand before many, many people through many shows and many different things, and I always get asked the question, why bother doing this? There's no infrastructure, they're not composting, recycling, we don't do that in our community. Well, nothing's going to happen unless we give it a voice. And I think that's why all of you are here today. That's why we're here today, because we need collectively to have a voice. So that's what we're doing, and I appreciate every one of you for coming out. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about plastics. And again, there's a lot of correlations here between Allison's slides and her deck and what I've got here that I want to present today. And there's some phenomenal information in the back as well from the University of Florida and the zoo and others about what we need to do. So I want to talk about recycling a little bit, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, and maybe we are looking at recycling as an end-all and the perfect situation. And it's not necessarily the case, but it's the right way to go. But I want to talk about that a little bit. So I want to talk about some terminologies. A MRF, MRF, is a materials recovery facility. Most counties have one. It's where we send all our recyclable trash. And it's really quite an interesting place to go to. How many of you have ever been to one and examined what's going on in a recycling facility? Okay, got a few hands here, good. We all should, because we need to understand the procedures and what's taking place in a recycling facility. The FTC, of course, is the Federal Trade Commission. They're kind of a watchdog for misinformation, for bad language, for what we would call greenwashing or recycling washing, misinformation out there. So there's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of watchdogging in the industry to help clarify the message and make sure people understand what's taking place and prevent companies from telling not so good of a truth about products that they might be making. Access is when a local municipal recycling program will accept items for processing. So does your MRF allow access for those products going in that big blue bin or at the back of your, by your waste bin that are going to be recycled? Do they, what access are they giving you? And I love this one, whether it's recyclable or recycled, they both have kind of a different connotation one to another. A recyclable meaning, and here it says more than 60% of consumers have access to curbside drop-off and that will accept an item. So there's a lot of access to put recyclables into play, but recycled, meaning that what actually gets recycled, is something that's been recovered, manufactured into a new version of its former self. So again, it's like an action there, that something has happened with that recyclable. So I want to kind of talk about this a little bit. Recovery relies on markets and legislation. Again, one of the reasons we're all here, you're here, is because you have a voice. You have a voice with your community leaders, your government. As business community, you're looking for change. You can be a vital part of legislating and pushing forward initiatives in your community that will make a difference. So basically here, let me make sure I have this right, you have community buy-in, and that's what we really want here. We need a community buy-in. There are folks that have to take that trash that recyclable product. And haulers, these guys are awesome. Sometimes they work for big corporations. Sometimes they're little guys that are just out there, you know, making a living. It's a job creator. Recycling has its place with creating jobs. Here's our MRF. That's the operation where everything has to go. The buy-in here. In that MRF, they have to have a location. They have to have a place to send that product. So nobody recycles. No MRF is in existence because they're just being nice about it. They're doing it because they're making money. And they have to make money to pay those employees, to pay those haulers, to do what they have to do. There's a lot involved in there as far as the economics are concerned. Market assurance, trade associations over an organizing support, you know, getting the buy-in, getting a place to take it to market. And then, you know, what can we do to handle volume, quality, overall impact? What is that going to offer the community? So there's a whole scheme of things here that make recycling work well, and there are things that unfortunately sometimes make it challenging. What I find very interesting here, this is a study that was done that shows what is most sought after in recyclables. And I think this is a little bit eye-opening here. Of course, our PET bottles, you know, if you have a reusable water container, that's awesome. But if you are buying those big, you know, you buy 32 bottles in a big thing from Sam's Club, and you've got all these bottles, you're throwing them away, throwing them away, throwing them away. And even with those bottles, if you've ever noticed, the plastic on a lot of our water bottles are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And believe it or not, the thinner they get, and they're not charging any less for the water, they're probably really, in essence, charging more. But in many respects, the thinner that plastic gets, it can become more problematic to recycle it. Okay, your detergent bottles, these are the things that are greater than 60% chance. PP bottles, so those of you who love your Chobani, your yogurt containers, all of that, here you go. Those are sought after, and I hope, how many in here actually, when they're throwing something away, if you're recycling at home or even in your business, are cleaning out the product? Good for you. All right, that needs to be done. A lot of times we, again, I think as Americans, we just want to throw it away, and we just assume that somebody's washing our garbage, and they're not. They're just not doing it, and they don't have the time, money, or expense to do it. And again, here we are talking about aluminum. Aluminum is probably one of the most sought after materials because it has a high dollar value, and it's made into all types of things. You know, all those cans and containers and things like that can be melted down. You know, Ford is using it to make fenders and car parts and engines, and everybody else, GM. Aluminum is a well sought after and a wonderful recyclable. Glass is as well and can be, but like anything here, and cardboard, of course, I think probably most of you are, you know, recycling your cardboard, which is a great thing to do. Then the next level down would be your gable top and aseptic. So all those containers like milk and orange juice that have the little screw caps, believe it or not, those are recyclable, and it depends on the market, but it can be done. All your rigid cups, clamshells, containers. But then we get down here, and this is really what I want to kind of make sure people understand. Less than 20% that can be recycled. Believe it or not, paper cups, because they're contaminated oftentimes with food waste and maybe not cleaned out, and also they don't know what's lining the inside of that, that paper can't be recycled in many cases because of the plastic coatings on them and so forth. And I think what's very important here to understand, same with cutlery, you know, there's polypropylene, polystyrene, there's all types of cutlery out there that, again, when they recycle and remake something, they don't take plastic and pour it into a vat and make some hyper, you know, breed of plastic. It has to be separated by its chemical substrate. So you don't mix plastics together to make some super bioplastic, or not bioplastic, but super plastic. And again, here at the bottom of the list, the foam, cups, trays, clamshells, all that protective packaging, that product is the most problematic and oftentimes is not recycled. So again, there's a lot of companies, and not to knock what they're doing, because the industry, especially in food service, has been so married to the inexpensive foam type products and so forth that, you know, You know, to say it can be recycled is more problematic than anything else, and it's not necessarily happening in the industry. This is an interesting, and I love this slide because it really relates to what Allison was talking about as far as the contamination that is entering into our streams. I do as well live in Florida, and again, all around our coast, everyone's extremely concerned. There's a lot of talk, a lot of discussion on banning and doing different things, but here's what I want to, it's kind of hard to see this on here, but 99% of virgin feedstock, so this would be petroleum-based products that are made into packaging, come from oil resources. We create 78 million tons of product that ends up in several aspects here. 40% ends up going to a landfill, so that's problematic. What I think here relates to what we're all here for today, because we're seeing, and from what I understand, there's a lot of initiatives here. There's a lot of trash flowing from whatever's out off your coast and whatever's on your intercoastal right here. 32% of leakage ends up in our environment, whether it's in our streams and oceans and lakes, or as well as just in the mangroves or out in our parks, out in our land, out in general. This is where 32% of that ends up, believe it or not, because of bad practices, because of poor, what people do. They just dump everything, and we don't have all the right infrastructure to capture it. 14% basically is being incinerated for power sources. And so here we end up, here's what I'm wanting to show you here is 14% does get collected for recycling. And out of that, there's loss in there because of contamination, food contamination, so forth. Items get rejected. And then cascaded recycling. But the big thing here is I want to show is 2% closed loop recycling. That's what percentage-wise is actually being remade into something again. And that's a very small number. And my thought here, and I want to bring this a point, this is not saying that recycling at all is a failure. I think the problem we have is our infrastructures, our system of how we do it, what we're doing with it, and as a community, how we're making a voice to change what we're doing. That's what needs to happen here. And basically, kind of going on here, again, create an effective after-use plastic economy. That's if it's going to work, we have to demand recycled content product. That has to happen. Otherwise, most of the food service companies and regular company manufacturers are going to continue using the available resources of virgin resin to make their plastic products. And we have to have a voice and say enough is enough. It has to be post-consumer, period. We want that content in the plastics that you're making. So by creating that demand, that allows a MRF to do its job, to pull these things out of our community and actually know that they're going to be made into something else. We need to drastically reduce leakage of packaging into our natural systems. And I think that's what we're here for today, is how can we do that? How can we work together to make that happen? And then really decoupling plastics from fossil feedstocks. That's where basically we as a company, Eco Products, are coming in and others, where there are offerings, there are great alternatives made of natural resources, renewable resources that grow every year. We're not sucking out petroleum that we do need to make fuels, to make essential plastics for important things. But to make single-use product that we blatantly eat off of and then just throw that plastic in a garbage can, in most cases it may not end up being recycled. That's a terrible, terrible way of handling a natural resource that took millions of years to get here. So when we look at the options of taking existing plant matter and turning it into containers, to turning it into cups and so forth, there's and all types of disposables. It seems to be what I'll show you here, what would be a better resource. So anyway, takeaways on recycling. Recycling is important. Absolutely it is. To say we shouldn't do it or it doesn't work, that's not what I want to say. That's not what our company says. That's what I think the industry is, we just need to do it better. And it's because recycling can be hard, but so can most everything. Recycling food and contamination that's contaminated the plastics make it more difficult. So again, it's training, it's educating. How are we throwing it away? What are we doing to be better stewards of what we're putting in that trash can? A compostable solution is also not easy because all the infrastructure is not here to do that. But again, I've often said to people, if we wait for it to happen, it's never going to happen. Unless we are actively doing something to force the industry to move in this direction, then we are all activists to do that, and we have to do that. The industry has momentum behind this solution. The shift is huge. Right now, we have seen major corporations, major chains, everyone's looking at a sustainable, renewable type of footprint. Okay, well, when in doubt, ask for help. That's what I'm here for. And I do want to talk a little bit about compostable versus biodegradable because the two terms are similar, but they're also very different, okay? Biodegradable are, everything is. I am, you are, the chairs you're sitting on, this table. Eventually, everything will biodegrade, but it could take hundreds of years. It could take 1,000 years. It could take 1 year. It really depends on several things. It has to be given time. And what's important here, the FTC, this is where the watchdog part comes in, because that word biodegradable is a very broad brush. And it's used a lot in the food service industry to kind of give leeway to products that really aren't quite where they should be as far as biodegradability goes. And I think this is important. It's deceptive to market products customarily disposed of in these manners as biodegradable. And again, what it's saying here, according to the FTC, they must break down and return to nature within 1 year after customary disposable. And the problem is landfills are not doing that. A landfill is not the right chemical process for composting or breaking things down. It's a tomb for trash. Incinerators have their place, communities use them, but that's not biodegrading either. That's just burning it to create energy. And recycling facilities do not enable decomposition. They're just a sorting process. So again, what we're saying here, compostability, okay, are products that are broken down by microbes, Mother Nature's creatures that do a great job taking things back to the earth. And within a reasonable amount of time, and create valuable soil amendments and leave behind no toxic residue. And I love, this is my tool. At Earth Day, I go to kindergarten classes, I go to colleges and universities. The audience is vast, but this is actual compost. Compost is a soil amendment. This is not soil. It's an amendment to be added to soil, because what is taking place here is products like these with food waste make this wonderful, nutritious additive to soil. As you probably know, especially here in Florida, our soil is extremely challenged. We continue to pump phosphates and nitrogen, all these things into our soil, but we're missing key ingredients to that. So again, it's not just about, we look at the ocean issues, the water stream issues, but we also have a major soil issue in this country as well. So we have a lot of ways of handling that, and I love this here. 40% of the food in the United States is wasted every year. When you think about food production, we're talking about the water it takes to create nice, clean, wonderful almond trees, nice and juicy to make that almond milk. The tomatoes, a lot of water in tomatoes, lettuce, it goes on and on. The amount of water that it takes to feed these plants is huge. And with that, and the trucking, the industries to move it around all over the country, it takes up a lot of energy. But out of that, all the production we have, 40% of it never makes it to market, never makes it to your table. And we are so picky. If you go to the grocery store and you see a bruised banana or a tomato that's got a little dark spot on it, you pass it by. It's perfectly edible, but you don't eat it, okay? We're very particular about our produce and everything else. So again, a lot of things end up going to 21% of the materials we send to the landfill are food. Food. Perfectly good food. I work with composters throughout the Southeast, and I see trucks coming in from Publix, from Whole Foods, from Food Lion, just tons of pineapples, tomatoes. It goes on and on and on, and you see this perfectly good food, cookies and baked goods just laying in a pile. Okay, and it's a tragedy, but again, it's how the system is working. But the positive thing about that is, in the sense of that food waste is the perfect component along with this to create this. If we're going to put back into the soil, instead of sending it to a landfill where it will rot, it will create methane gas, it will be an environmental issue as it is. If they can't capture it, which they cannot capture all the methane in a landfill, this is a viable alternative to it. So, the thing is with this, all the big guys in the room, your Sodexos, Aramarks, all the big feeders on college campuses, at hospitals, and so on and so forth. And there are major corporations like this that have sustainable initiatives to move away from standard foams and plastics and to capture food waste. A stadium, major stadiums, the same thing. You have 80,000 to 100,000 people. That's a lot of food waste after a game at a stadium, whether it's at a college or university or whether it's at a professional sports team, baseball, football, whatever, basketball. There's a lot of food waste as well as disposables being thrown away. They are making the initiatives to capture that, to stop sending it to a landfill. So again, here's an example of Chipotle, workplaces, here's again a stadium showing their waste diversion rates at 89% because they've taken the initiative to sort and purchase products, whether it's ours or others similar to ours, that can marry with food waste to create a viable end-of-life solution with something like this. I hope that explains a lot. And here, a lot of studies being done. Here's all different ways of capturing disposables, food service food, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, here's the thing. This is the arrow here that I want to focus on. These are 27 solutions of handling food waste. The most viable one is to compost, to take that already wonderful, rich food waste and turning it into a soil additive that will contribute back to farmers, local communities, landscapers, and it goes on, and to you even in your home garden. So we're seeing major shifts toward this. It's a wonderful job creator. Currently, of course, there's not enough. Again, as I said earlier, I get the question, it's the cart before the horse, the chicken and the egg, if we sit back waiting for the industry to put everything in place for us, we will be waiting a long time. Change comes by activism. Change comes by what we're doing here today. Change comes from a community and a business community having a voice, and that's what I think we want to do here. So we are an advocator as Eco Products. We're part of an industry that has many facets to it, and we feel, be an active part to institute that change. I always say to folks at shows, look, we're not just making stuff to sell. We really need people educated and understanding how products like this in the industry work, and also to be buyer beware of what you're buying as well. So our focus here is our bundle and our core, who we are, okay, as far as what we offer to the industry, what we can do as far as here's the big thing is advocacy. We working with folks like you, working with many organizations throughout the country to advocate for change. And we know the industry will not change unless it's given a voice, and you are the voice. So basically, that is basically what I wanted to cover here. And there's a lot of product here to look at. There's a lot of product outside the door. There are sample kits. And again, Edward Don, we have partnered with them in your market here to really offer you the very best that we can contractually. It's because we want to help you do the right thing. And anything that you have questions on right now, I think, Nick, do I have time? Okay, are there any questions? Oh, there's a gentleman behind you, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And I'm happy to get together with all of you after this, but I'm curious. I'd like to find out. I know we met with one of our county commissioners recently, and we began a conversation about composting. Mm-hmm. And we're also, as most Keep America Beautiful affiliates, Keep Brevard Beautiful works very closely with our waste haulers. Our largest one here, of course, Waste Management, Waste Pro, and are beginning that conversation with them. But we're just at the baby stages, and I'd like to find out and like to get together with all of you that work in other states, other communities, to find out what they did and how they got started and how it's working, mm-hmm. and some of the kind of really in-depth details so that we can bring it to our community leaders, those folks I just mentioned, and show them how it's being done in other communities so we can get it going here.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I'm going to run back to a slide here because I think I missed really, for the lack of infrastructure, especially when it comes to food waste management and capture along with compostable type disposables in the industry, there are several reasons why it's problematic. And I'm not trying to point fingers at the big landfill, land waste management companies, but oftentimes there's insufficient laws as far as regarding organics diversion, creating feedstocks. That's where all these, like the public stuff, where's that going? You know, there's issues with that on maybe a local level. Also, government incentives to allow composting to be a viable alternative to landfill. Permitting challenge. This is always one because everyone assumes a composting facility stinks, and it doesn't. If it's done right, the natural process of composting doesn't smell. It's not, and I have several that I go to. You do not see birds flying over them. They don't have vermin problems as far as running around because they're actually the heat generated. It's a very sterile type environment because it's a natural process. Although you drive over by a landfill, you see birds everywhere. You see trash flying around. It's a different process. And again, people assuming that they're going to smell bad. You know, we have people that just don't want that in their backyard. Landfill tipping fees, that's what it costs the truck to get into that facility. And sometimes the tipping fees, meaning going to a landfill, they're sometimes lower, most times lower, because it's cheaper to just dump it in the landfill. Where a composting facility, depending on how they want to do it, they make it so high that, you know, it's costing these guys too much money, so it doesn't create the right market, so that becomes a problem. And again, also route density. That's the guy who has to pick up your food waste and everything else to get it somewhere. If he only has one person on the south side of town and another person on the north side of town, he's got to drive that truck all over. He's not going to make a living doing that. So it's a buy-in by the community, which is, I think, what we're wanting to talk about here. So, and then there's the challenges of contamination, which means, you know, stuff that's going to the composting facility, there's going to be someone who thought their compostable flatware or cutlery wasn't really compostable. It's not. And so that gets in the mix. So there's a whole process of, you know, the composter having to deal with contamination. How do you filter that out? And it can be done, and it is done in most facilities. But again, this is an area that I spend a lot of time in my region, in the Carolinas, in Georgia. And now we're seeing it happen more and more. And I actually have a gentleman in Plant City, Florida, that has an organic composting facility that takes both products that are certified compostable as well as tons of food waste. And he turns that into a soil amendment that the citrus industry is using to replace chemical and fertilizer type application to their trees. They're seeing an improvement to the orange groves where they're using organic compost. It would only seem to make sense that Mother Nature has the best solution for things. So, yes.
Could I just follow up real quick? Is the gentleman you're talking about in Plant City, is he obviously it sounds like it's private, is he doing it in collaboration with government or not? Not.
Totally
Okay.
private.
Can
totally
we
private.
afterwards get together and find
Absolutely.
out the closest place that's doing it with government so
Right.
we can start
Right.
that? Thanks.
Okay, yes, we will. And you had a question here.
My question was exactly his question, because I think seeing is believing, so that helps a lot. But I'm almost to that point where everything that I would have, if I get rid of my straws, everything that I have at my restaurant would be compostable. Okay? But then if you put it in a plastic bag, does that negate the
Well,
whole thing?
there are compostable bags that are made out of plant material, and I'm going to grab one right here. Actually, this is called EcoSafe. These are made out of plant starches. They're phenomenal. They will break down in a commercial. They have to be this. There are biodegradable bags that are plastic bags, actual polyresins that are treated with chemicals to break them into smaller pieces. Well, we heard earlier from Allison, those smaller pieces are problematic. So yes, they might break into smaller pieces, but what happens when they're in a landfill? That gets blown around. What happens when those birds or vermin or whatever, raccoons, they run off with something? You know, again, we're not helping the situation. We want it to break down and turn into this. This is really what the end game is, and actually has probably the most viable final solution. But again, it's an industry shift. It's a whole different way of thinking, and that's what we all have to do. And that's why, again, venues like this is important, so we can get in front of you so you can say something, right?
Also, I have a heart for it, okay? And it's cost me. I mean, I've done that. It's 8 years we've been doing this. So if you don't have a heart for it, do you know of any place that you have incentives set up that business owners it'd be incentive for them to do it, as opposed to, you know, it's like the good guys getting hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Financially.
Right.
And do you know of any venue where they've set it up where there is incentive to do it?
Well, you know, what we've done here with Edward Don and, you know, working with Allison is we have a contract for anyone in this community to put that together and give you the best pricing we can. I'm going to be honest with you. Some substrates, this versus foam, again, this is a sugarcane container. This is going to be more expensive than that nice, cheap, inexpensive foam container. The problem is, and I think where I want people to begin to think differently in the industry, especially in the restaurateurs and hotels, is yes, this is cheaper. But in the long run, what is it costing us for our future to clean this up out of the foam and the straws? It's costing us billions of dollars in cleanup. It's costing us major damage to our ocean, streams, and lakes. It's causing havoc in our animal kingdom. You know, so yes, we've chosen the least expensive thing, but it's costing us the most environmentally. And I think that's where we all, as a community, you as business owners, that's the message you need to get across to those who maybe aren't buying in, but they need to understand, by not buying in, what's the long-term ramifications of what they're doing. Because it's cheap doesn't make it better. It's just cheaper. That's all. That's all it is.
If I could interject real quick, there is a video on YouTube called The Plastic Age. Watch the first 6 to 8 minutes of that video. It will bring the hair on the back of your neck up. I also encourage you to share that with as many folks that are part of this movement, because this has to be a movement. I hate to use that word, but it's true. It's a movement. Show the movie, show the video, watch the video, share it. Okay, the end of the video shows Pharrell Williams, who we all know, who's a major recording artist, is trying to do something with plastics for the good of the environment. But watch the first 6 to 8 minutes; it'll blow you away.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have two questions.
Okay.
The first is, And you'll have to excuse me, I came in a little late, and so if you already touched on this,
Okay.
just everybody stick your thumbs down or something. So the first question, when you talk about, I liked that you were asking about businesses and sort of, taking the initiative as a business owner with the composting and things like that. Do you know of any limitations legally? Are there any, code limitations, legal limitations, anything? I mean, and now you probably don't know our laws, but generally, are there any restrictions on businesses having something like that on site?
Okay. It totally varies by a municipality. It's a localized thing. So that's a very good question, and I wish, we have 50 states, and every state has counties in those states, and you have a self-run government in those local municipalities and towns and counties. So there's no, the issue always is, especially on the ban side, let's take like New York. We're not going to allow 32-ounce foam cups with big giant drinks in it. Well, that turned out to be a major war in the city of New York. And foam bans are happening all over. Even here in Florida, there's a foam ban in South Beach, in Miami. No foam. They don't want it, period. So, and there's always kickback to that, because it always seems when we tell people they have to do it, for some reason, even if it's the right thing to do, they dig their heels in because they don't want to be told. That's I think how we are as Americans. We don't want to be told what to do. We want to make those decisions and make it on our own. And I think that's where things like this, when people get educated, when people understand why, then I think we would have the buy-in. So I wish I could tell you there was a uniformity to composting. It does vary by state, regulations, where they want it, what they'll allow, blah, blah, blah. It's a very convoluted system. But again, unless it's happening more, and I think the more it happens, and there are groups that are advocates for it, when they have an opportunity to share that and do what we're doing here, but on that level with composters, I think that's where you're going to see more changes like that happening, where it works, it can work. But it's always about to the money. Are we going to make money making this? And yes, you can make money doing this. But again, it's hard to speak for every municipality and every government what they want and what they believe in and what they don't believe in.
And the second question is not quite as business focused. And again, if you touched on this already, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Thinking about what I can do just in my own world and in my own home, with composting. What, if you could just briefly talk about what definitely, in the food world does not go in compost, and just real briefly, meat. What kinds of things do I not compost?
Okay. Well, again, it depends on what you're doing at home. There are people, I don't know, I have a compost, I have a beautiful incinerator in my sink in my kitchen, and it never gets turned on because we throw everything. I bought on Amazon, a nice square container, and I live in Florida, so I have live oak trees around my house. So I have brown matter, I add green matter, and I put all of our eggshells, I put everything in there, okay? And again, and I'm not in any hurry, it takes a long time. That type of composting doesn't happen quickly. Commercial composting is very different than what you would do at home. Again, my wife and I just came back from a trip overseas, and we were in Scotland, and every house, someone we visited, they had on their counter next to their sink a little bin that all their food scraps went into. It was picked up in a little green bag with their garbage every week, and it went off to a composting facility. So it was like so exciting to see that taking place. And it was as ordinary and part of their life as anything else. And I thought, wow, we've got to get there here. So as far as you're saying at home, again, caution is always with proteins, things like that, because again, depending on the type of vessel you're composting in, it might be better not to do that. Again, you should see my yard, my garden, my plants, they're just like, it's like Jurassic Park, they're huge. I haven't used Miracle-Gro or fertilizer in years. I've eliminated grass, I've got, I've tried to do drought resistant. My yard is really cool. And, but I use my compost and it works. It's a wonderful, natural, Mother Nature's fertilizer. So, good. Anyone else? More questions. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the transition to the infrastructure that we'll need. And could you explain the possibility or the desirability for a potential either co-location or a partnership with biosolid farms in the composting business?
Biosolid farms. Okay, if
Yeah.
you would explain that one to me a little bit better. Okay.
Pretty much using human manure.
Okay.
And
okay.
they're sending this from the wastewater treatment facilities and things like that, sewerage or whatnot, and putting them out there and turning it into fertilizer. Of course, nitrogen and phosphorus rich. But I was just curious: is it even possible or desirable to bring the food waste industry, the eco products and such, anything compostable?
When it comes to the sewage that comes from the leftover, all of that sludge that has, some has nutrients in them, from human waste and whatever, there's a separation there. And I think there needs to be, because we don't know. There are other things in that stuff that could be problematic when you think of the amount of medical drugs. That's why they say, please do not, your old pills, don't put them down there, but people do. So you're talking antibiotics, you're talking all kinds of things that can be mixed into that. So there is a separation in the industry. When we talk about food waste, it's what most of you as restaurateurs or who have a hotel and you have a restaurant in it or a bar, you're sending food waste, perfectly good natural food type items that have all the right ingredients for the compost and things that we're looking for. There's two schools of thought there with the use of that product.
Right, and I completely agree with you, and there's a reason why we keep it separated. But I suppose in the transition phase, as we are looking for currently or growing established infrastructure, where we can send our stuff for now,
Right.
even to co-locate it at these areas where it's kind of set up to put stuff out there and just let it be for a while. That's a question. Is there anything that's going to be
Again,
constraint?
probably a helpful tool for anyone looking. And again, composters are farmers that are taking food waste to feed to their pigs and their to their cows and whatever. If there's a site that we encourage people to go to, it's called findacomposter.com. It's very simple. Just Google findacomposter.com. You can put in your zip code, and it may be any number of things to find a home for your food waste. So again, but it's from that we're seeing that as that begins to grow, and as you as a community start asking for and looking for those opportunities, that's where we're seeing the job creation of those things happen. I've got young people, and I was sharing this with Allison yesterday, I'm 60 years old, and I work with a lot of young kids that are in their 20s, and there's one in particular in the Carolinas. I call him the Bill Gates of composting. The kid is phenomenal, brilliant, but they're creating jobs. They're creating what you're looking for because they have the market for it and they have the desire for it. So, it's coming, but it has to be, you have to have a voice. And it varies. Again, it's hard to say how it will be created, but finding those in your community that maybe are doing it in part, and seeing where their future is. This gentleman I talked about in Plant City is, someone who's, that's where he is. It's not like he has this great conglomerate where he's opening all over the state of Florida, but we're hoping to see that happen.